This work session on the 4th. No public comment will be taken, and the council will take no formal action. Tonight's topic is on our enterprise zone. And before I turn it over to Jesse and Kim, I just want to state this is a complex, there's a lot to unpack. And my goal is to, just bring us all up to the same level because we need to make a decision that's going to, that has a lot of implications. And so as we go through this, just listen. If you have a clarifying question, there's going to be spaces in between where I'll ask if you have questions of staff. Later on in the presentation, there's lots of policy questions. Those questions are there to get you to start thinking. We are not answering any policy questions tonight. But if you have additional information you need to help you come to an answer later, that will be the opportunity. And then I also like to say to staff, don't rush through it. Don't feel like you have to get all through this. We all read through the packet, and there's a lot of policy questions. There's a lot of things. And so really, I just want all of us on the same page. Okay, cool. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesse.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. While Mariah is bringing up the the presentation, as the mayor mentioned, it's multi-layered. You'll probably notice in the back that there were 12 different policy questions. It seems if you kind of pull something over here, something pushes over here. And so we'll step through this, as the mayor mentioned, very just kind of methodically. Kim and I are going to combine on this presentation. I'm going to take it up to the point. I'll do some of the history and the purpose. Kim will pick it up. What is an enterprise zone? And then I'll kind of pick it back up at the opportunity zone and take us through the end of the presentation. I think we have all the way until 7 o'clock. So if you would, Mariah, next slide. So as the mayor mentioned, the purpose tonight is to talk about the economic development enterprise zone. I would note the program expires June 30th of this year. One of the conversations that we had with Business Oregon is what happens if it does expire. The city can reapply if they would like to. For context, we're also going to talk a little bit about the Opportunity Zone. That program doesn't expire until December 31st of 2028, and so I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I did want to offer that just to provide that additional context about economic development incentives. So with that, next slide. So really, I think probably of import here is 2040 does recognize the economy as a principal goal area. The one part that probably stands out and is most connected to the enterprise zone is the outcome, which is create a balanced and diversified economy comprised of a variety of commercial and industrial businesses offering high-paying job opportunities. The enterprise zone will kind of touch on all of those in some way, and we'll get into that as it does. So next slide, please. A little bit about how the goal actions connect to the enterprise zone in some way. If you look at 1.2, the volume and diversity of commercial business development, it connects to that a little bit. An enterprise zone is very limited in the commercial application. It's mostly for the industrial application. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. Update the city's economic development strategic plan. This could be a part of that economic development strategic plan. Increase industrial development. Enterprise zones are really targeted at industrial development. Oh, we just lost it. Oh no. Oh, there we go. So enterprise zones, if you think about an enterprise zone, if you think about an incentive program, it really is targeted toward industrial development. The commercial application is limited to hotels and motels only. That's it. So, back, if you would go back, please. Economic Improvement District, that's really toward a different type of business. That's typically toward smaller businesses. It's really not applicable to an enterprise zone. It's different than an enterprise zone. So just wanted to kind of decouple those. Strengthen partnerships with local small businesses. How that connects to an enterprise zone is how you tailor the program, if you have a program, and if you do have a program, how you tailor the program. Some of the things that may connect to that we'll get into would be like the minimum investment requirement, the job requirement, those types of things. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're stepping through this. Workforce development programs, how that connects is if you charge what's called a community fee, that fee can go toward workforce development programs. We'll talk a little bit more about that later as well. Partner with property owners to attract businesses. This is an incentive that if you were a property owner, you could use to try and attract business. And then 1.10 incentive programs to support, retain small and local businesses. I already kind of talked about that under 1.6. So next slide. So a little bit of history. This is the state enterprise zone program. So what's important to kind of recognize about an enterprise zone program is it is, as with, many different local municipality programs, there is state statutes that create the program, have parameters about the program, and kind of provide what I would characterize as a framework for the program. In this particular case, it was created clear back in 1985. So 40 years ago. There were some major, kind of major updates along the way. The two that I would center on today would be in 2023. The legislature restricted it to certain types of fulfillment. It restricted it from fulfillment centers such as Amazon being eligible for an enterprise zone. So it kind of took one industrial use and said, this is not eligible. It established the school support fee. We're going to talk specifically about that. It extended the program through 2032. The legislature has extended this program on multiple occasions, but right now it will end in 2032 unless the legislature extends it. And then it required publication of agreements, in Forest Grove's case, 5-year agreements, for 21 days before an enterprise zone agreement can become effective. So there's this public notice requirement of 21 days prior to becoming effective. And then just most recently, it restricted data centers. If you look at the legislation, the restriction for data centers goes into effect date specific on June 6th, based on how many days after it was passed at the legislature. So to meet that 21-day requirement, the kind of effective 5-year application was 21 days from June 6th, would put us back to somewhere in mid-May. I don't know the exact date. So. Okay. So next slide, please. So the history of Forest Grove's enterprise zone is ours goes back 20 years. It was first established in 2006. And when you do an enterprise zone program, it goes by 10-year increments. So the city, if they pass and become a local sponsor of an enterprise zone, you can't do it for just 5 years. It has to be for a 10-year increment. So in 2006, it went to 2016. In 2008, it was amended to include Cornelius. And I'd like to recognize Peter Brandon, the city manager of Cornelius. So he's here to also watch the presentation. And then in 2016, the program got extended into 2026. There was another resolution that amended it in 2017. What's kind of interesting in the application for the enterprise zone, and you'll see a map of it here in a bit when Kim gets into it, but there you have to have each specific parcel number enumerated in the application. It's very specific about what properties would be in and what properties are not in, and you'll see that on the map. 2023, the City Council amended it to increase the application fee. The application fee before was $25,000. It got increased to $50,000 for years 1 through 3, and then 2024, pursuant to state legislation, implemented a school support fee. Okay. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kim.
May I ask a quick question, please? So with the data center restriction, is that like a change that they're no longer eligible
Yes. Yeah.
forever?
Well, it's a 1-year moratorium. It's a
it's-
1-year moratorium.
It's 1 year. So
Yeah, I think what I had heard in some of the legislative discussion, Mayor, was they specifically said, as of this date, no more data center applications. And it was a 1-year moratorium with an intent by the legislature to revisit the program kind of writ large this coming legislative session. Yeah.
okay, thank you.
All right, so what is an enterprise zone? It is at top line a state-sponsored economic development program that gives businesses specifically a property tax exemption for up to 5 years. And we're going to talk a lot about there's a 3-year program and a 5-year program. So up to 5, it really means there's a 3-year and there's a 5-year if they meet certain requirements. And we'll talk a lot about those requirements, especially in the policy question section. It's designed to attract living wage jobs, encourage new investment, and to target specific industries, increase the long-term tax base. So that's going into the reason for the short-term property tax abatement is to encourage long-term growth and to encourage long-term property tax growth. The enterprise zones do not exempt income and payroll taxes. They only affect the property taxes. And it's limited to industrial, and as Jesse was saying, industrial and then some commercial, but commercial specifically motel and hotel industries. For industrial uses, it's most industrial uses, manufacturing, warehousing, distribution, food processing, and technology, except as we discussed for the moratorium for the next year on data centers. Retail businesses and other commercial businesses that are not hotel motels are not eligible for enterprise zone tax abatement. It is administered by the local government, must comply with state requirements, and there is an opportunity for local governments to also pull some levers in order to tailor the program to our own needs. And the state law sunsets in 2032 unless the legislature extends. We're going to get into a lot more detail on a lot of these bullet points, but if there's any questions. All right, next slide. So talking about the state requirements. So state has requirements both for the 3-year and for the 5-year. For the 3-year tax abatement, anyone who is applying, any business that is applying must increase full-time permanent employment by at least 1 new job, or if they are, for example, reinvesting, redeveloping, or expanding their business, they must create 10% new jobs compared to what they currently have hired. There can be no concurrent job losses within the state, so trying not to create a tax incentive that de-incentivizes business in another part of the state. Maintain the employment level for the duration of the exemption, so you cannot hire on and then fire within the period of the exemption, and enter a first source hiring agreement from WorkSource Oregon. And this is an agency that basically targets Oregon-based qualified applicants as first-round candidates. The 5-year tax abatement must meet all the requirements of the 3-year abatement, although you must also receive approval through a written agreement between the firm and the local government, and that's where the city really does have the ability to add more requirements. You must pay a school support fee of 15 to 30% of abated taxes. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in Forest Grove, but that's what it is in statutes, between 15 and 30. And the average compensation for new hires must be at or above 150% of the county average wage. Next slide. Those are the state requirements. The City of Forest Grove elected in the program to create additional 3-year and 5-year requirements. For the 3-year program, an applicant is required to invest at least $50,000 in building equipment, machinery, or structures. Pay all new employees an average of 150% of the minimum wage. So that is greater than or equal to the 5-year abatement state requirement. Pay an application fee equal to 1/10 of 1% of the investment with a cap of $50,000. The application fee of 1/10 of 1% of the investment, that is part of the state statute, although the cap is something that is unique to Forest Grove. Increase full-time permanent employment by 1 person or 10%. So we have the opportunity or option to change that, but we have stuck with state statute. And maintain increased employment over the abatement period. And then for our 5-year program, all of the above, plus must pay a community support fee of 25% of abated property taxes in years 4 and 5. Statute does allow for up to 25% of abated property taxes in years 4 and 5, and in years 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Although in years 1 through 3, it is required to be spent on economic development projects. Although in 4 and 5, that requirement is lifted. And then in Forest Grove, elected to pay a school support fee of 15%. So that could be between 10 and 30, and we elected to do 15, and that was set by the school district. And then pay all new employees an average of 150% of the average Washington County annual wage, which is in line with what the state requirement is, although we could also adapt that. Make it stricter, we cannot make it looser. And then we also require the first source hiring. Yep.
So I'm a little confused with the Forest Grove and Cornelius requirements. And so as we start thinking of our policy, do we have to also have the Cornelius City Council agree with whatever we agree with? Or how does this work?
It's my understanding that, yes, the last time this was agreed to, and Peter may want to confirm this, but it was approved by both city councils. It was approved by Forest Grove first because Forest Grove was helping to administer the program, and then it was approved by Cornelius. it's not uncommon to have multiple cities in one enterprise zone application. So it's not an uncommon thing. We'll show an example later about Clackamas County that I think has 5 cities within the application for the county. But it does require, if at least the process, the way it worked, Mayor, was both municipalities approved it, if I recall.
One question I would ask is that I don't remember, is the Oregon work? Well, yeah, WorkSource Oregon is, what if one municipality wants to renew it and one wants to let it expire, and then that can happen, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think if the cities wanted to decouple, it would be a new application by both cities, I believe, or at least an amended application by one city.
Okay. Do we know the time? Like, is Cornelius talking about this as well? You can just say yes or no, sorry. Okay. Thanks. Okay, I'll let you guys continue. If anyone has questions and I don't see your hand, just let me know.
I'm happy to answer questions as we go along. So a couple of examples of how an enterprise zone could work. In this first example, business A has 100 employees and $100 million in assessed value in their buildings. They would like to expand their business by adding 10% of employees, which does qualify them for an enterprise zone tax abatement. And they make the minimum qualifying investment of $50,000. Then they do qualify for the property tax investment on the new investment. So they they qualify for tax abatement on $50,000. For the $100 million in assessed buildings, they are still required to pay property tax on. Next slide. In business B, so this is an example of a new business, starting a new business, hiring employees, making an investment. They will hire at least one employee who is paid 150% of the minimum wage. They will make a minimum qualifying investment also of $50,000. In this case, their entire business of $50,000, their entire infrastructure, will be exempt from property taxes for the 3 years. If they also want to pay or elect to apply for the 5-year program and pay a community support fee of 25%, a school support fee of 15%, and pay employees 150% of the county average annual wage, and if they agree to all of the other requirements for a 5-year program, then they will also qualify for the 5-year extended abatement program. That is an option for the business if they elect to apply for 3 or 5-year. Any questions about the examples and some of the requirements before we move on to the next section where we talk about applications? The city does receive numerous inquiries about the enterprise zone. Miles Glowacki, our enterprise zone economic development coordinator, receives quite a few of those. While it's not the leading factor, it is an important consideration when folks are considering where they want to select a site and where they want to build their business. And it is the leading development tool in the state. And it can indicate to a business that a community is business friendly and open to industrial development. Since the program began in Forest Grove, there have been 14 applications that have created 421 jobs and about $129 million invested in the community. Currently, there are 2 active applications creating or will create 36 jobs and estimating $321 million in additional industrial development or commercial investment. Excellent. So an application must be submitted prior to any physical work beginning. So this is the process for how a business might process their application. The business applies for a tax abatement in the city. Then there is a pre-authorization conference that is held between the city, the county tax assessor, and the firm. That purpose is for the firm to really understand what their requirements are, what the timelines are to initiate the abatement, and to identify their points of contact for the county and the city and the tax assessor. A written summary of that conference is added to the application. For a 3-year term, as long as the firm meets all the requirements, the city approves the enterprise zone application and forwards it to the tax assessor. There is no 21-day waiting period in the 3-year process because there is no agreement that is signed between the city and the firm. For a 5-year agreement, the city presents additional requirements to the firm, and upon the firm's acceptance, the application is approved and the agreement is signed by the firm, the city, and the county assessor, and noticed for 21 days. And that is because there is that agreement to the additional requirements. Next slide. Today, there are 73 enterprise zones in Oregon across counties, cities, ports, and tribal lands. 7 are in the metro area, although and I won't go through the list, there's quite a few, although several have been allowed to expire recently, specifically in Tigard, Lake Oswego, and Oregon City. You can see, previous slide? There's a pretty good assortment and range across the state, both rural and urban areas. Slide. In the city, total area is 1.15 square miles, 736 acres. As Jesse said earlier, Cornelius was added in 2008. And then when this is approved by the state, we have to include in our application every single individual property. So we don't submit the map, we submit the list of properties, and you can see them even in their parcel tax lot listed here. And next slide. I want to go through a couple other cities that are comparison stars. We've got 3, starting with Hillsborough. They do require a minimum investment of $1 million, so compare that to Forest Grove of $50,000. They require 102% of minimum wage for a 3-year. Ours is, we do not have that requirement, and 125% of minimum wage for a 5-year. We have the state requirement, which is 150% of the median wage in the county. So there's a difference. And they also have a community service fee range, and they've based it on a ratio to tax abatement to jobs, but the bottom line of it is that they reduce the community service fee for the more jobs that are trying to really encourage that job creation in Hillsborough. Next slide. Beaverton also requires a minimum investment of $1 million, again, contrasted against Forest Grove of $50,000. They've set theirs at 75% of Portland minimum wage. We are at 150% of Washington County minimum wage, and they have a community service fee of 20% compared against our 25%. Next slide. In Clackamas County, so this is again different, and rather than being a single jurisdiction or even 2 jurisdictions, it's spread across, I believe, 5 different cities. Their application fee is not capped at $50,000, so they have done the 1/10 of 1%, but without a cap that is allowed by state law. They do not offer a 5-year abatement program. They have only offered the 3-year. They have other programs that they're offering within the county that go longer, but they do not offer the 5-year enterprise zone specifically. And they do require that employment must increase by 10%. Interestingly, they don't seem to have a numerical requirement, which makes it interesting for new businesses and how they might qualify, but I imagine that the state statute prevails. Some common critiques to enterprise zones is that the tax breaks are too large compared to the jobs created, so that so you can see how some of the other local comparisons and Forest Grove have kind of tried to turn those levers in order to address some of these common critiques. So for example, Forest Grove and creating jobs, lessening the impact of the community service fee in order to incentivize more job creation. Second point is the enterprise zones reduce funding for schools and other local services. A property tax abatement does also affect your local school district as well as any special districts because they are funded also through property taxes. Companies would have invested anyway. Large corporations may benefit more than small companies. You can see kind of how that can happen with depending on where you set your minimum investment value, and that there are some environmental or infrastructure concerns. Next slide. In contrast to some of the common critiques, some of the common reasons why you might implement: attract new private investment, keep existing business here by incentivizing reinvestment, trying to create an incentive to grow businesses in the local community, creates jobs, payroll, which does influence payroll taxes for the state, and leads to more property taxes once the exemptions expire. The exemptions do expire after 5 years. And up here, I'm going to turn it back over to Justin.
All right, thank you, Kim. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on the opportunity zone. I provide this mostly for context, showing kind of where the area is and what an opportunity zone is. An opportunity zone is a completely different program with a completely different type of incentive. So one, it's based on census tracts. It's designated by the federal government. And the reason it's designated by the federal government is basically in an opportunity zone, any capital gain that you have if you hold the property. So let's say you buy it for $1 million and you invest some money into the property, however much it might be, and you end up selling it for $5 million. Under this program, you would not pay capital gains on the capital gain, which would be $4 million. That capital gain normally goes to the federal government and to the state government. So typically opportunity zones are centered in areas that are economically depressed, and the idea is to try and incentivize and infuse new capital into it. Our particular program expires on December 31st, 2028, and anecdotally, we've had kind of far fewer inquiries about this. However, it doesn't mean that it hasn't been necessarily influential in trying to attract some type of development. As far as how it overlays with the enterprise zone, about 3/4 of the opportunity zone is also within the enterprise zone. So for those particular properties, you could apply for the city for the enterprise zone, and then you could also apply with the federal government for an opportunity zone and avoid both property and capital gains tax. You do have to hold the property for a certain amount of time. I think it's 5 or 10 years before you can realize it. So you can't come in, kind of turn and burn it, if you will, and get the incentive. You do have to hold on to it for a while. So the next slide just kind of shows that, some of the other kind of parts about it, but that's more for reference. So if you go to the next slide, please.
Counselor Schimmel has a
Any
question.
questions before we get into the policy stuff?
Well, then I have a question too, but go ahead, Counselor Schimmel.
I was curious about the zones. If we were to change the map of either zone, is that a new application or revision?
So the opportunity zone, I don't believe can be changed until 2028. And the opportunity zone is based on a census tract. So when the city applied for that, we actually applied to the federal government, and the zone has to meet certain criteria. There's got to be certain economic metrics of demonstrating that it's economically depressed. I don't know what all those metrics are offhand, but I do know it's a completely different application process than the state. The state, and one of the policy questions we're going to get into is, yeah, the council can change the area of an opportunity zone. That's one of the kind of levers that you can pull, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a subsequent slide.
In an earlier slide, you had how many jobs? There's like 14, and there's 416 jobs, and then there's 2 applicants currently, and there's 36 jobs. So one of the things I would like to know for the next work session, or when I'm making this decision, is really when we look at our 2040 plan and the goal of workforce development and bringing jobs, and and I would like to add in living wage jobs. What is that? Like, what is the number? What should we be really looking for in a warehouse, in an industrial site, because if that's a route we want to go, I would want to know what percentage. That's one job for 10%. When I see 36 jobs in an industrial zone with 2 applications, I'm feeling like we're not hitting that mark. And I want to make sure that our policy hits that mark. So that would just be, as I'm, simmering and thinking about this, that's something I would like to know.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a wages slide. The only thing I would add right now, Mayor, is if you looked at both the Beaverton and Hillsborough examples, it was a percentage of minimum wage. And so in Hillsborough example, for the 3-year program, it was 102% of minimum wage. Ours was 150%. So from a wage perspective, we're a little bit above what Hillsborough was. We're 25% lower than Beaverton for years 1 through 3. In years 4 and 5, we're 100% of the county average. The county average is approximately, I'd have to remember the number. I think it's $90,000 a year for the county average. So it'd be about $135,000 a year for 150% of the average wage, which was higher than both Beaverton and Hillsborough's. So, but that is one of the things. And then the only other thing I would mention before we maybe get into the policy slides is it is important to kind of keep 2 concepts in mind when we talk about an enterprise zone. One is a new investment, somebody that is kind of brand new, that's coming here, that wants to establish a business, and what the requirements may be for that. The other thing to consider is existing businesses that are here that you may want to reinvest. And so instead of them maybe, and the requirements for that can be in some cases different than the requirements for a new business. So that's why the state said, at least from an employment perspective, it was 1 job, which means that would apply to a new business. It has to be at least 1 job. And then the 10% is really kind of applicable to businesses that are already here that are reinvesting. In other words, if you have 100 employees and let's say you invest $2 million in your business, but you only add 9 employees, That's not 10%. So the renewing business or the reapplying business would not be eligible for that tax break. That makes sense. So there's kind of the two buckets, the reinvesting, the business that's already here, that's reinvesting, and a new business that may want to come here and build on a greenfield that's not already built
I
on.
think I was mostly following, but on the new investment, the
Yep.
new business, what is the job? You said one?
So right now, the state requirement is one, you have to have at least one job.
Yeah, I'm not feeling that.
And yeah.
So that's what I want just
And I
for,
think
like-
that's why we mentioned later, that's one of the levers that the city can pull.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Council President Valenzuela.
Yes. So my question is, if this reinvestment company, right?
What's that?
If a company wants to reinvest, right? They can apply for this.
They
Right?
can. Yes.
Okay. And then they don't have to pay, right, the taxes and do.
Just on that increment. So for example, I'll take
Okay.
let's say we have a business here that has 3 processing lines of processing. And they applied for an abatement and they received an abatement on that, and that abatement is now expired. Okay, so all of that investment now comes onto the tax rolls. It might have been a 3-year, it might have been a 5-year program. So that whole manufacturing facility, the buildings, the structure, the 3 lines of production are now all on the tax rolls. If they reinvest and add another line,
Yeah.
then they can, if they meet all the criteria, if they meet the employment criteria, the minimum investment criteria, they pay the application fee, and depending on what length they apply for, a community service fee and a school support fee, they can receive an abatement on the 4th line, but they
But
wouldn't
not
receive
the
an
rest.
abatement on the previous 3.
I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you're
that,
welcome.
That was beautifully
Yeah.
explained,
Oh,
Jesse. Thank
thanks.
you.
Okay.
Sorry,
Wait,
Jesse.
Councilor Schimmel has another
Sorry.
question, and then I'm going to do a little preface before the policy.
I don't know if it's there's something I want to make sure that we understand is the economic impact of the jobs versus the investment, and we understand both, because if we look at the expired, there was 14 applications, 421 jobs, only $129 million investment relative to 2 applications, $321 million investment. Is that I assume has there's a economic impact to the city of that investment relative to the number of jobs per application. That making sense. That we imagine that having a whole bunch of jobs well above minimum wage is, I guess what I'm suggesting or inquiring about is that that's not the only important factor, is that the size of the investment has an economic impact.
It
itself.
does. Yeah, the size of the investment kind of, and it's and different. There's different capital investment and different job requirements for different industries. Some industries are more labor intensive than other industries. Some have a higher capitalization than other industries. They may have to spend a lot more to get the factory going per se than the other one does. So it just kind of really depends on what type of industry. The minimum investment or the overall investment is significant in that when it comes out of the abatement and it gets assessed by the county, that is the amount that would generate the property taxes. So on one hand, you have an investment that after it is done with the abatement, and let's just assume they get a 5-year abatement and they depreciate the assets within the building over a 5-year depreciation schedule. The county assessor, as I understand it, they will go out and they will assess that structure. They will assess the structure, all the equipment within it, and they will give it an assessed value, and the property tax rate is going to be based on that assessed value. So if it's very capital intense, probably going to be a higher assessed value than if it's less capital intense. The jobs is kind of, and both factor into the program. The jobs is more of kind of the enduring commitment, if you will, the one that is, and the jobs are, the jobs will pay income tax, and the income tax typically go to the state, but those also lead to persons paying property tax, of course, as well. So I don't know if that answers your question, Counselor, but it's a different economic impact for each one, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, and that was, to check my understanding is that there is for both. So we need to understand both.
Yeah, and I think what we were proposing was to kind of talk about each layer, because those are probably two different layers, and talk about this layer and then that layer, because like I said, there's a lot of policy questions associated. So.
Yeah, so we're going to move into the policy question portion of it. And, this is as much for my benefit as the whole group. But I think if we could, as much as possible, sometimes it's better to see the whole picture and then ask questions. So if at this point we can let them go through all of the policy questions, because, a slide might answer a different slide. And then at the end, we'll go through it. And again, there's no rush.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I think one of the things to keep in mind as we go through the policy questions would be, what are the state requirements and what are the levers that the city may be able to pull if the city would like to kind of renew the program or expand or extend the program. So kind of keep those two buckets in mind, and staff will do our best to kind of enumerate what can and cannot be changed. I will kind of caveat that by saying in some cases it's not always clear. And the reason it's not always clear is if you go to the next slide, this is what the state statute says. And the things I'll kind of point out in the first bullet is the sponsor of an urban enterprise zone, and we are an urban enterprise zone. You may require an eligible business firm seeking authorization under the enterprise zone statute to satisfy other conditions to be authorized. So the state says, yep, you can create these other conditions. And then it comes back in the second bullet and basically says, but they must be reasonably related to the public purpose of providing opportunities for groups of persons, as defined by the sponsor, to obtain employment, including but not limited to providing training to these groups of persons. So there's a reasonable requirement. So yes, you can, but it's got to be reasonable. And then the third section is really that if you do impose requirements, it has to be a policy. It's got to be passed by the city council. It's got to be published. It's got to be applied evenly and equally to all of the applicants. So that's kind of the third bullet. So just kind of keep those in mind as we go through it. And again, we'll do our best to point out which levers are open and which ones are mandated by the state. Next slide. So the area. The area in Forest Grove has remained the same since 2006, with the exception of adding Cornelius, I think, in 2008. In our conversations with the state, it's easier to reduce than to add. So when you add property, you have to meet certain economic criteria and kind of demonstrate the addition. When you reduce it, you can just reduce it. At least that's kind of our understanding. So it's easier to kind of make it smaller than it is to make it bigger. The potential considerations, commercial and industrial. Right now, the entire commercial area, for example, is in the map. Keep in mind, the only commercial business that can apply is a hotel motel. So I'm guessing here, but I'm guessing back in 2006, it was, we want another hotel motel, so let's just make all the commercial area eligible. Then you can build a hotel or a motel anywhere within that area and receive the enterprise zone incentive. As far as the industrial properties, virtually all of the industrial properties within Forest Grove were included in the application. So it was all the industrial property is included. What some other municipalities have done, and this is just again to kind of think about, is some have said, you know what, we're having a difficult time kind of incentivizing development in this area. So we really want to try and incentivize this. We're doing great down here. We haven't really needed any incentives here. But we want to, so we really want to kind of incentivize this particular area. Maybe it doesn't have as good of infrastructure. Maybe it's not as good of a location. It's off the highway or something. I don't know. Those are just kind of things to consider. So. Next slide. So the duration, and we're going to kind of circle back to this. I just put this up there to kind of keep it in mind because it's one of the last slides as well. But the thing to keep in mind here is we've seen cities limited to 3 years. We've seen others, have like a 3-year program with an extension to 5. Cities have the discretion. You can say 3 or you can say 5. So next slide. So the application fee, this gets a little bit wonky, so I'm gonna kind of walk through it. An application fee is if you apply for an enterprise zone, you have to pay the fee. Okay, so it's kind of the entry requirement, so to speak. And it's limited by state law to 1/10 of 1% of the investment. So if you skip down to the fourth bullet, for example, on a $100 million investment, 1/10 of 1% just to apply for the program. Doesn't mean you've necessarily been approved, but if you meet all the criteria, you get approved. But just to apply for the program, if you don't have a cap, it would be $100,000. So here's your application. Here's a $100,000 check. And now we're going to process your application. If you have a cap, then it goes up to that amount, and obviously then it's capped. So if you have an investment of $45 million, you would not reach the cap of $50,000. You would pay $45,000 if you invest $45 million. If you invest $20 million, you'd pay $20,000. In Forest Grove's case, though, if you exceed an investment of $50 million, then you're capped at $50,000. So you can't go above $50,000. And so, Councilor Schimmel, you mentioned earlier $320-some million in investment previously. Ours was capped at $50,000. So in that particular application, if it went over $100 million in investment, it would have been capped at that amount. In Clackamas, it would have been $100,000. So just something to kind of keep in mind. The other thing, another variable, is you can change the cap or just eliminate the cap, or you could lower the cap, whatever the council would like to do, but you cannot change the percentage. So the 1/10 of 1% is in statute. Can't change that. And then last is you can have a different cap if you would like for a 3-year and then for a 5-year. So for example, if you want to make it easier to apply for a 3-year agreement, because it's a shorter abatement, you could have a lower cap than if you have a 5-year one, and maybe you could have a higher cap for that. So, good? Okay, next slide. So the minimum investment, you've already probably picked up on there's a wide range between Beaverton and Hillsborough at $1 million and Forest Grove at $50,000. So the minimum investment is just getting back to the earlier question. It's how much you have to invest into your business. The thing to keep in mind about the investment requirement is it's applicable to both new businesses. A new business is likely going to spend a whole lot more money getting their business going than a business that's already here and adding to it. So if a business is already here and they're adding to it, their investment is going to be less than if you are starting a brand new business. If you're building your house, you're going to spend a lot more than if you're just adding a room onto your house. So that's just something to kind of keep in mind. Ours is $50,000. It's the state minimum. You can go, it does not mandate a maximum. So you could say presumably 5 million, 10 million, something like that. If you do say something like that, some of the trade-offs associated with that higher number is obviously fewer people qualify. So some people might read that to say we're trying to incentivize larger industrial development, if that makes sense. So instead of allowing the smaller businesses to participate with a very low entry fee of $50,000, we want to target large industrial businesses. So we're going to have a minimum investment of $50 million. If you don't meet it, you don't get to apply for the program. So. Keep going. Okay, next slide. Number of jobs. Getting back to the mayor's earlier question, the state has a minimum. The minimum is 1 employee for a new business or 10% of the total employees for the renewing business. There's no maximum, provided it meets the, quote, reasonable requirements. So kind of gave an earlier example. If you have a new business and you have 2 employees and you spend more than $50,000, you can get a property tax abatement. If you are a renewing business and you have 100 employees and you add 5, even if you spend $1 million, you don't meet the jobs requirement, you could not apply for the abatement. You would not meet the criteria. So going back to your earlier question, Mayor, some of the things to consider are, should the requirement for new businesses be, you know what, we want 10 employees right off the bat, or 20 employees, or whatever the number is, but to apply for the program. And then the second question would be, if you have a renewal, if you have somebody that's reinvesting, should that requirement be different if they're reinvesting? So it's our understanding that you can bifurcate those requirements. You could bifurcate for new and then also for reapplying. Good?
Yeah, I think we're going to go through
Okay.
all of them.
Next one.
Unless there's
Wages. So the wages, the question here is, what type of jobs are you trying to attract, right? So the higher the wage that you require, you might have fewer applications, but you might get different types of jobs, right? So in our particular case, it's 150% of the minimum wage in years 1 through 3. That's approximately $50,000 a year. So an applying business, if it's new, they can have one employee, they can pay it $51,000 a year. And if they invest $50,000, they can get a property tax abatement for 3 years. For years 4 and 5, we differentiate and say it's 150% of the county average annual wage, which is $135,000 a year. So if a business comes in and let's say they're hiring 2 employees and they're paying them $50,000 a year, they do not qualify for the 4 and 5 year abatement. Just right out the gates, they don't. If they are paying their employees $140,000 a year and they meet the minimum investment requirement, then they can get a 5-year tax abatement. But they would have to meet that the wage requirement of $135,000 a year, and they would have to keep those employees on during the term of the abatement. If at any point those employees, one of them gets laid off and it gets assessed, then they would lose the abatement from that point forward. If you remember during some of the budget conversations, we had a business that no longer met the property tax, the enterprise zone application, and it resulted in a tax payment of, I don't remember what it was, but it was in the neighborhood of $20,000 or something. And we've carried that in the budget. Actually, we spent it on the economic development strategic plan because it had to be spent on economic development. But that was an example where a business did apply. They got it. They didn't meet the requirements, and then they had to pay taxes on the year in which they did meet the requirements and every year forward from there. So those are things to think about for wages. Next slide. The community support fee. Another way to look at this is a community support fee is essentially, if it's the statutory maximum of 25%, the 25% community support fee is 25% of the taxes that they would have otherwise paid. That's all it is. So if you have a community support fee of 25%, the abatement for the business is 75% of the taxes, not 100%. So does that make sense? So it's the same. They just call it something different, but it's essentially 25% community fee is you'll get 25% of the taxes. The important thing to note here, we do not have one in years 1 through 3. You can charge one. We charge the maximum in years 4 and 5. Beaverton charges a lower one than us, and then as Kim mentioned, Hillsboro's is tied to jobs. So the more jobs, the lower the community fee. The higher the jobs, or the lower the jobs, the higher the fee. So if you have a business that doesn't have very many jobs, then they will charge a higher community support fee up to 25%. That is the maximum you can charge. So, next slide. I know this is tedious. Sorry. So it's just a lot there. So the last one I just kind of circled back. You can, after kind of considering all of those, you can either have a program that's kind of 3 years and then you do more to get years 4 and 5, or you can just have a 3-year program. So that's it. I think that's about it there. It's a lot. Yeah, I know. Sorry. So next slide. The school support fee. This is a little bit interesting. The minimum's 50%. The maximum is 30%. By state statute, you cannot apply it in years 1 through 3. You can only apply it in years 4 and 5. Revenue actually goes to the state of Oregon, and then it gets reapportioned according to the formula and comes back to all of the cities. It's not a direct link between our support fee, what gets paid in, and what comes back. Not a direct link. It goes into the general fund of the state, and then it gets reapportioned according to the school formula. I don't know exactly how that works, and then it comes back to whatever it would have otherwise been. All of the nearby enterprise zones charge the same amount. The Forest Grove School District must consent to the percentage. In our case, they consented to the 15%. So, next slide. And then these are just potential other things to think about. Oh, yes. Yeah, of course.
No, I have a question there. There's some things that I don't understand. So if this revenue goes to the state of Oregon, I'm talking about the school support.
Yep, school support fee, yeah.
So it doesn't come to our school district.
Not necessarily. It goes into the overall general fund of the school, which increases the general fund a little bit for the state, which means there's a little bit more money to reapportion to all the schools, but it doesn't come back
Okay,
dollar for dollar.
But it doesn't come back to the 15%, they allocate it however they wish to
Yes,
do it.
correct.
That just doesn't, well, never mind. That's,
And it's administered differently, but I won't, yeah. So a couple other things to kind of think about is potentially a limitation on extensions. We're still looking into this, but a limitations on extensions could be you only get it at the most 5 years and then you're done. You don't get to reapply. Like even if you add capital, even if you reinvest in your business, one and done. Or you can apply for one extension and then you're done. The way the program works now is you, in theory, could get a 5-year abatement. In year 4 or 5, make another capital investment, get another 5-year abatement, make another capital investment, and get another 5-year abatement. The way that would work is the increment in the first one that goes on the tax rolls would stay there. The second increment would also go on the tax rolls, but you would have a rolling abatement on the new investment that you make. I know that gets complicated, I apologize, but right now there's no limitation in state statute on the number of times that you can apply and receive if you continue to make a new investment.
Does Forest Grove have a limit on that currently?
Right now, the statutory limit is 10 years. So
But
it
it's
can
not-
go to
so
the end
Forest
of
Grove
your.
doesn't.
Yeah, I don't know of any municipality that does. I don't think any municipality has a limit on it in the sense of if you qualify for it, you get the extension to where your enterprise zone is authorized. Right now, our enterprise zone, the state's is authorized through 2032. So, yeah. Pre-application requirements. Right now, it's pretty open. For example, like when can you apply for it? Do you have to get through land use application? Do you have to have purchased the property? Is it just something you're thinking about and you want to do it? We've looked at other municipalities and we haven't found necessarily a lot of pre-application requirements, but it may be something to consider. And then local moratorium on specific industrial development. Would the city want to attract certain types of industrial development, but not necessarily other types of industrial development? And how much can a municipality restrict the potentiality of that? That question is still a question. We just raise it. We would need to get some additional clarification on that. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get full clarification on that prior to the work session tonight. But it remains a possibility. So. And I think that's all, Mayor.
Okay, so there was a lot of policy questions. So do we want to go? Yeah, go ahead. Councilor Shim will start. You can start.
Just generally, I know we have this June 30, 26 milestone on what policy, is it necessary to answer all these policy questions by then to renew or extend, or can these policy questions be stacked, just based on it, conditions?
So
throughout the year?
if the council would like to extend the program, let me answer it this way, I guess. Maybe I'll let a little bit of air out of the balloon. The council doesn't have to do, if the council doesn't renew or extend the existing program, it just sunsets. The program sunsets, and the council can continue to work on it if you like, and then apply at a later date after June 30th, and the state will consider it. If the council chooses to do that, the application process is a little bit more difficult according to state, but it's not overly onerous. And the other thing would be that if the application is approved or if it's extended, it is automatically approved or extended for 10 years. So there's no option in between. It's either 10 years or no program.
Can I say that a different way? Or did you
Please,
understand?
yeah,
Did
please.
everyone understand that answer?
Yeah, just to clarify the question, and I'll use one of your words, bifurcate that milestone from the policy questions. And if we decided, we want to extend this, we don't quite know what the answers are on the policy questions. Does that have to coincide or?
Yeah, we wouldn't extend it because we would be changing it. So what we would do is we would allow it to sunset, and then we would reapply and do changes. Because if we extend the one we have now, we can't make any changes to the policy. That's
Sorry, for what I understand, there is a cost if you have to reapply, instead of if we do it before the expiration day and just extend it, right? If we just let it sunset and then we decide, this is actually really good for us and you need to, apply for it. There is a cost, right? Like,
I'd have to research that,
no, I
Councilor
saw
Valenzuela.
on one of the slides.
Yeah, I know it's a little bit more difficult, like the process is a little more difficult, but I don't know that there's a cost associated with it.
Okay.
So I will say that applying for the program, whether it is an affirmative application. So when you do apply, you do have to outline what all your requirements are and how if you have any local requirements, that's part of the application, and that's why we're having the conversation now. So if you just essentially kind of re-up the program like as it is right now, then it would still be the exact same. You wouldn't be able to address these policy issues later because now you've got a 10-year program that's the same as what we have now, if that makes sense. So if the council would like to change parts of the program, you can either do it now prior to the June 30th deadline and reapply, or you can let it expire and have and then apply for a new enterprise zone under different auspices.
Just to belabor it, because that's what we all like to do. But if we extended it and then canceled it, then we would have a penalty. Then it would be much more difficult.
Then you cannot reapply.
You could not reapply.
You cannot if you terminate your program
And
or
then
you cancel your program, you cannot reapply for the enterprise zone.
right. Any other questions? Councilor Martinez.
Got it. Do we have any examples currently of how it's been advantageous for us or otherwise?
Sure, we could go back to the one slide, Mariah, that shows the businesses. I think so far we've had,
Like business example.
Yeah,
A slide that said business A, business B example. I think
all the
maybe
ones
or
that
no.
have applied. Keep going.
Oh, the application slide.
Boom, right there. Yep, that one. So far, we've had 14 applications. So these are, and most of them were 3-year programs. I think there was 2 5-year programs out of those 14. So they were all 3-year programs. They created 421 jobs, $129 million investment. Now, all of those businesses, so the value of the improvements that they made, those are all now on the tax rolls for property taxes. The 2 new applications, and those are just applications, 36 jobs and $321 million investment. As we kind of mentioned earlier, it's an incentive program. It's very difficult kind of to discern whether a business would have moved here if you didn't have the program. That's a subjective kind of determination. There's other cities that don't have enterprise zones that do receive an industrial development, but it may be for other reasons than an enterprise zone. I think it varies business by business. So
This my 2 cents. I think it's.
Can you
good.
grab the microphone?
Oh, sorry, I'm forgetting. I think this is a good thing, and I would like for us to see it extended, even if we have to go through the details and all the policy questions, revisit that, and maybe modify some of the details. But I think it's good for the city to have this incentive available.
So I think and I don't want to speak for staff, but as we will have another work session at our first June meeting. So I guess, there's some questions we need. Do we want to continue this program, and do we want to renew it, or do we want to modify it? And then do we even want to have it? And then what are some of the things that you think should be requirements or components or tied? And so I guess my question to you all is, what do you need? What information do you need from staff to bring back to our next work session so we can start answering and coming to consensus with some of those decisions?
For me personally, I have the information on this presentation that I need. But of course, I have to, kind of think about that. Do we cap it at 50,000, for example? Or do we need to reconsider that, and do a little bit more like the other cities do? Those are details, things that I would like to think about. But I totally would support continuing with this program.
Anyone else? Well, I had the question about, go ahead, Councilor Schimmel.
Well, just the comment I wrote down anticipating this question was, any change should be strategic and aligned with our long-term plans, not just the 2040, but, for the industrial development that we want, employment objectives, infrastructure capacity, so weighing against what infrastructure we have the capacity for, and the compatibility with the surrounding neighborhoods. So where we have, in the case of Crane, we have abutting zones, industrial and residential. So does do we weigh on that factor? So I agree with Councilor Valenzuela that it's a prudent program to have. It's just under what conditions we have it, and just considering all those different factors.
But data centers are restricted, right? They're not.
Only for 1 year. That's going to be a part of our policy work. My understanding is it's a 1 year moratorium. So that means that if we don't address anything else within this policy that we have tools to address, then they can remove that moratorium and they would be allowed if we don't have anything in ours.
Okay, but we can extend to 5 years the moratorium.
No,
Like if we
no, that's a state moratorium. So in our policy,
do our own.
I don't believe cities can just do.
That's one of the things that we're trying to
I don't know.
get clarification on is how far can a city council restrict the types of industrial development that may or may not apply? That's really the kind of overarching question.
But something that I know for sure, while we don't know this, what I know for sure we can do is tie jobs. Like we have those tools right now. We literally have the tools to say we want this many jobs. If I'm just saying that's a tool we have. I'm not going to talk about any industry. But so when I'm saying like what we are married to, if we choose to continue down this road, we are married to this for 10 years. So we really need, I agree with Councilor Schimmel. We need to be strategic. We need to listen to the community. We need to look at our 2040 plan. We spent a lot of money and we did a lot of community engagement. And it said a diverse economy with bringing in industrial jobs. Like, so those are the reason I'm like laying this out very slowly and making sure we're all on the same page is because this is where do you want to be, right? What's the end result, and making sure we're doing the things that using our tools, right? Knowing the state laws, but also using our tools to design this for our community.
Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead, Councilor Marshall.
No, as far as the school support fee only going to state, there's nothing we can do to get a kickback to Forest Grove School District as opposed to just going back to the 15% to the state.
It's my understanding that no. It goes directly to the state. And it's a check that's literally written to the state.
Mm-hmm.
And with going forward, I mean, is there ways that we can actually say that, like, it kind of makes it hard? So we're trying to boost the economy within Forest Grove, but these people could be living in other cities coming to Forest Grove, and would these jobs be considered as part of the increase in jobs in the area for that specific business, or does that specific business have to hire within Forest Grove?
It's my understanding, and Kim may want to.
You think like even if you live in Hillsborough or you eat and you, I mean, I don't
It's
know.
about jobs created at the business, no matter
Yeah.
where that person lives.
Okay.
So there is
Yeah.
the hire in Oregon, hire local first. So trying to create jobs for folks who are already living in Oregon, not necessarily bringing people in from other states. But with the person, for example, who does live in Hillsborough and is employed by this business in Forest Grove, then that would apply to their employment.
Counselor Martinez.
So this is actually just an incentive for companies. If they can use it, great. If they can't, they can't. And hopefully they'll build here anyway, is my impression. And then as far as the school incentive, I think the hope is too that other municipalities who bring in more business, we would, because it goes into one pot, we would, I can't think of the word, we would benefit from that as well, because we don't seem to have as much industry coming into ours as others may.
So maybe an additional comment, Mayor, if I may, about the school support fee.
Sure.
So the lever that the city council can pull on that is in years 4 and 5. The state restricts to applying it in years 4 and 5. Right now, ours is 15%. Council wanted to pull that lever, you could raise it to 30. That's the maximum that the state would allow you to raise it. The other thing to be mindful about it is from a property tax perspective, those property taxes are abated in years 1 through 3 and then 4 and 5. And then after that, that investment comes on the tax roll, and then the school will receive the property taxes from that point forward, after that abatement has done. And so sometimes the question becomes is, I think you alluded to it, Councilor Martinez, would the business have otherwise moved here, and therefore would you have otherwise received that revenue had you not had the incentive?
With that 30%, there's no guarantee that that's coming back to Forest Grove.
No, it just generally increases the size of the check that gets written to the state of Oregon that then gets reapportioned to all the schools.
Is there any, I'm just like also thinking that we are doing the economic strategic plan, where I'm just trying to figure out the layers of all of these things. Anyways, just, yeah. Yeah, what? I'm just processing, trying to figure out the cross pollination and how we can come out with what we want. Okay, is there anything else that before we close this work session that we need before our next work session? Any direction from staff? Okay, do you need anything else from us?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Nope, we're good. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, council. I'm going to give us about a 10-minute break, bio break, please, and we'll reconvene at 7:10 or 7:07. Gives the action plan, all the things to do our agendas. I want to float an idea. If a counselor comes to a council meeting and says, hey, I would like information about this involving federal response, then we'll know to schedule a work session. But if we don't hear something, and then I want to say, like, there is an exception that sometimes something might happen, an incident might happen, and based on a previous work session, this council had given myself and Jesse the authority to act in a way that we. So if we also then feel like we didn't hear something, but a situation happened that we need to come to council with, then we could add it at a later date. But is that okay with y'all? Because there's some work sessions we need to bring forward. And I just want to make sure time-wise, I don't want to act against the consensus of the council. But I also want to try to figure out how to schedule it in a way that we give staff enough time to do the work to prepare for a work session, with also you guys having voice as well.
I mean, we have a couple mechanisms. One is additions, deletions. The other is council communications. If any of us is privy to something that should count.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Is during council communications, if you say, hey, I want to act, I want a work session, we already have consensus to do it. then that will take precedent. We'll schedule it for right? But otherwise, if we don't hear anything during council communications, we might not schedule a work session on this topic. Is that an okay? If something changes, just say it during council communications or let one of us know. Okay, cool. Do you all have any things for us? Or are we okay with that? I'm going to adjourn this work session. Thank you very much.
Madam Mayor, look at the time. We are doing.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the Forest Grove City Council to order. Will our city recorder please call roll?
Council President Valenzuela.
Here.
Councilor Schimmel.
Here.
Councilor Martinez.
Here.
Councilor Marshall.
Here.
Mayor Wenzel.
Here. We acknowledge the land on which Forest Grove is located rests on the traditional village sites of the Atfalati, a tribe of the Kalapua who originally inhabited the Tualatin Plains, including Forest Grove. They are now part of the Confederate Tribes of Grand Ronde. Now will the audience and the council please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will now move on to item B on our agenda, which is public comment. Time provided for anyone wishing to speak to the City Council on an item not on the agenda or on the agenda but not scheduled for a public hearing. Comments are limited to 2 minutes unless additional time is granted by the presiding officer. The public comment period shall not exceed 30 minutes unless a majority of councilors present vote to extend the time. Zoom attendees may use the raise hand option to be called on. We have one person signed up for public comment, and that is David Dion.
Thank you. I would like to ask you today what the purpose of ICE is. Not just ICE, but the National Guard, the FBI, DHS, in short, the agencies that our government uses to engage in violence. It's a powerful question. Of course, there is a level on which it answers itself. These agencies exist to put armed people with orders into places where the government wants them to be. But that answer is tautological. It points us to an even more important question. What is the purpose of armed people going into our communities? At this point, I fall back on an old adage. The purpose of a system is what it does. With that in mind, I implore you to look at what the federal government has done with the agencies it controls. Communities are living in fear. DHS, ICE, and the National Guard did that. Multiple cities, Minneapolis, Chicago, Memphis, Portland, have been described as war zones under full-blown occupation. DHS, ICE, and the National Guard did that. Families have been torn apart. DHS, ICE, and the National Guard did that. People have been assaulted, arrested, and killed in the street for exercising their First Amendment rights. DHS, ICE, and the National Guard did that. The purpose of a system is what it does. How willing are we to see these purposes carried out in Forest Grove?
Thank you. Is there anyone on Zoom who would like to give public comment? And I forgot to ask, is there anyone in the audience who may not have signed up for public comment who would like to give public comment? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item C on the agenda, the consent agenda. Items under the consent agenda are considered routine and will all be adopted with a single motion without separate discussion. Councilors who wish to remove an item from the consent agenda may do so prior to the motion. Any item or items removed will be discussed and acted upon following the approval of the remaining items. What is the wish of the council?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. The consent agenda was moved by Councilor Martinez and seconded by Council President Valenzuela. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a 5-0 vote. Additions and deletions. City Manager, do you have any additions or deletions?
I have no additions or deletions. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Any proposed by council? Seeing none, we will now move on to item E, which is presentations, and we have our library director, Ms. Colleen Winters, to update us on the library IGA with the county.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I was here about a month ago to give you an update on the IGA and the process, and I'm here tonight just to tell you what's happened since then, which is pretty focused on a singular item. But I'm happy to answer any questions you. I don't intend to go through the whole report that I gave you a month ago. But if you have any questions about that or anything you want to talk about before we get to the only significant change to what you heard last month, I'm happy to chat about that.
Are there any questions about anything from last update? Okay, no.
Okay. So, having said that, then I would refer you to page 11. I'm sorry, page 10. You'll note that so what we're going to talk about tonight is the county's general fund and the relationship to the transfers and like that. The money is what we're going to talk about. So on page 10, you'll note that the first bullet under regarding county general fund allocations addresses the current language in the current IGA. The second bullet speaks to what was proposed. Tonight, we're going to talk about what the new proposed language is based on conversations, meetings, communiques that have happened between the member libraries and their jurisdictions and the Washington County Board of Commissioners. So at the May 19th, the next page, if we can move on, has the new language that is now proposed to replace the current language. This happened at their May 19th work session. This is the revised language that is now proposed and has been, I think as of today, added to the IGA that you have for your consideration. I don't think I'm going to read it out loud. I think you can see that, or the language there is, again, the result of a lot of conversations and communiques from other cities, mayors, executive board, library directors. A lot of people have had something to say about the current language and the proposed language, and this is the result of that.
I mean, are you done with, or can we ask questions, or? I'm not trying
Sure,
to cut you
though-
off. I just
yeah.
have so many thoughts about this.
The only other changes come on the next slide, which is just about the timeline, and there's nothing particularly dramatic about that. Today, there was a meeting where they intended to authorize the signing process and the final version of the IGAs that they were asking the members to sign.
So I guess my question is that when the county came back with this new language, what did they assert was any different from the language they had proposed? Because I don't see any, I don't see any difference.
I don't know if the
So I didn't know
city
if they explained.
manager would like to speak to that, or does he trust that I can respond? I don't know.
I think if you toggle back to the last slide, please, or the previous slide. So the initial proposed language was projected county general fund transfers are determined through the county's annual budget process. And then the next slide, if you go forward, Mariah, please. I think, Mayor, there's a recognition about kind of historical perspective and the allocation of general fund monies, but it doesn't obligate the county to contribute general fund as part of the formula. So in that effect, it's the same as the previous slide.
Yeah. I'm just going to go on public record as saying that I value the relationship between Washington County and the city of Forest Grove. And in my time as mayor, I have continually worked towards strengthening that relationship. Recently, the county asked all the mayors to endorse the library levy, and we did. And community members helped pass that library levy. And it appears to me that we did this work and community members showed up and said, hey, we really value the library, which is great because I think the community does. And it feels to me as now the board is saying, oh, well, we have these additional funds. And so historically, one of the main things the county has serviced are libraries, right? That historically has always been part of the general fund. And now they're saying, it's our discretion how we do it. I'm going to be pretty honest with my community is that I don't know. I'm going to continue talking to my commissioner. I'm going to continue talking to other commissioners and other mayors, but I don't know what leverage I have right now because the county got what they needed from us. They got us helping them pass this levy. And now it doesn't feel like it is a partnership. It's like we got what we needed from you, and now we're going to make this decision how we want to make it. And I think it's, in the long run, going to hurt the trust that community members have with Washington County in any future levy. Sorry, I know I don't need to tell you that, but I'm just very frustrated. Sorry. Any other, I don't know, are you wanting questions now or did you have more of a presentation? I kind of derailed your whole thing. Sorry, Pauline.
I'm just listening.
Any questions?
I just agree with you, Mayor. It is frustrating and you feel deceit. I feel deceit. And I'm sure many members of the community will feel the same when they begin to realize that this has happened.
I think the
Counselor
only
Schimel.
thing I would add is just having sat through a number of these meetings, discussions. I've been to the board meetings. I've been through the executive board meetings. I've been to policy group meetings where all of this is discussed. And I think the Washington County Board of Commissioners heard a lot about this. I think they heard generally a consistent message. And I guess that's all I can contribute. I think the process of communicating to the Board of Commissioners about what jurisdictions and member libraries thought about this, I think that was pretty thorough. So, sorry, that's not very helpful, but it's true.
Counselor Schimel.
I concur with comments. It's a distrust based on past practices, whether you're talking about MISTIP or other levied funds that get siphoned away. And our only recourse is through our public education on our expectations, what the levy states, what we advocated for, and relative to what we receive. The only other question I had was in their work session, they were deliberating between a 1 year and 5 year. I'm assuming it's going to be a 5 year in the agreement. I would have been in favor of the 1 year just to get through.
Sorry, we tried.
Yeah. Well, they discussed it, but I think in the end they decided on 5 year. But I think what the public can appreciate is when someone is asked for feedback, it's important for the one engaging to reflect how that feedback gets incorporated into the content of a policy or agreement. And I listened to the county work session from last week, and the narrative is 2 years of engagement, but I'm not seeing that feedback being incorporated well to the degree that the feedback was vigorously given. And I was really offended that there seemed to be this contempt for feedback, suggesting that getting so many calls from mayors now was conveniently late and disingenuous when our agreement was only received 2 weeks ago. And that doesn't line up with public meeting process that we honor. So I value the relationship we have with the county too, and want to try to cultivate that. But it was just, to me, disingenuous. The behavior is what's really disingenuous, and the distrust zone over time. And like I said, the only recourse we have is through our own public education and continued appeals through each budget cycle.
Mhm. Okay, any other questions or comments? Yeah, and I hope you know that our comments aren't directed towards you. Like, we know you've been saying through all these meetings, and I think that Councilor Schimmel brought up a really good point. The process of going through this IGA, the way that it was presented, my understanding to staff is very piece by piece by piece. Like, they didn't give us the whole agreement months ago. So when they say like, oh, well, now we're just hearing from you. Well, you didn't talk about the money until a few weeks ago. Like, the most important part of the agreement didn't come out until you're going to vote on it weeks later. So anyways, we'll just keep fighting the good fight. The libraries are really important, and we need to support libraries. We need to support public safety. And, I'm frustrated, but I also don't want my frustration to be a message of not supporting services that are essential. They're essential services to our community. It's more of the process, the system and the process. So thank you, Colleen. Oh, one more thing from Councilor Schimmel.
Since I was so aggressive in my remarks, I should acknowledge that Commissioner Willie went to bat for us last week. He exposed the issue almost to the point of declaring dishonesty. So I do want to give our commissioner credit for representing us well.
Okay, thank you. We are now going to move on to item F on our agenda, and we have a number of resolutions and public hearings. So let me chill out, take a breath. Okay, gotta get onto so I'm going to call our Assistant City Manager, Kim Ezel, up. And are we on 2:15, 2:16? Okay. I will now open the public hearing on Resolution 202615 and 202616. If approved by the City Council, these resolutions will certify the services of the city will certify the services the city will provide and declare the city's election to receive state revenues. Do any councilors have a conflict of interest to declare? Hearing none. I'm going to change it. Our Assistant City Manager, Kim Ezel, will now present the staff report.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'm talking to you about the certifying services and declaring city's election to receive state revenues resolutions. In order to receive state revenue sharing, the city is required by the state to annually elect to participate in the state revenue sharing program and to certify city services. The attached resolutions fulfill the requirement of certifying the services provided by the city and electing to receive state revenues for fiscal year 2026 through 2027. This certification needs to be completed annually, even though the city has started doing a biannual budget process. For fiscal year 2026 to 2027, the city is projected to receive about $450,000 in alcohol tax revenue, about $15,000 in cigarette tax revenue, and approximately $41,000 in state marijuana tax revenue, and approximately $300,000 in state revenue sharing, and approximately $2.2 million in state gasoline tax revenue. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Does the council have any questions for staff? Hearing none, I will now call on persons who signed up to comment on the resolutions. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and the city of residence for the record, and whether you are a proponent, opponent, or other comment. Are there any members of the audience or on Zoom who would like to provide public testimony? Hearing none, the hearing is now closed. Is there a motion from council to approve the resolutions?
Move to approve?
Second.
Council President Valenzuela moved to approve, and Councilor Martinez seconded the motion. Are there any additional questions or discussions from the council? Hearing none, will the city manager please read the resolution by title only?
Resolution 2026-15, certifying services provided by the city of Forest Grove.
Thank you. Will the city recorder please call roll?
Counselor Schimmel,
Yes.
Counselor Martinez,
Yes.
Counselor Marshall,
Yes.
Council President Valenzuela,
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel.
Yes, the vote is 5-0. Resolution 202615 and 202616 are approved by the Forest Grove City Council. Thank you. We're going to move on to our next resolution, which is Resolution 202617. Hang on, I need to.
Before we move on, I do think we need to approve 2026-16 as well.
Oh, I only did one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Can we please read? I just have to have him read the title.
Mhm.
Can you please read the title only?
Resolution 2026-16, declaring the city's election to receive state revenues.
Okay, is there any discussion from council? Is there a motion from council?
Motion to approve.
Second.
We already had a motion, right? Am I
The
fine?
motion for the
15.
for 16 or 15, not 16.
So it's moved by Councilor Marshall and seconded by Councilor Martinez. And then do I need to have the city manager read it by, yes, can you read it by title only again, please?
Resolution 2026-16, declaring the city's election to receive state revenues.
Thank you. Will the city recorder please call roll?
Counselor Martinez,
Yes.
Counselor Marshall,
Yes.
Council President Valenzuela,
Yes.
Counselor Schimmel,
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel.
Yes, the vote is 5-0. Resolution 202616 are approved by the Forest Grove City Council. Okay, now we will move on to 202617. I will now open the hearing on Resolution 202617. If approved by the City Council, the resolution will adopt the Capital Improvement Program excise tax for the 2026-2027. Do any councilors have a conflict of interest to declare? No. I will now ask our Assistant City Manager, Kim Ezel, to present the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor. The Capital Improvements Program excise tax, also known as the CIP excise tax, was initiated in 1990 and is required by ordinance to be reauthorized by resolution each fiscal year. The City Code requires that 90% of the proceeds for the tax be used to fund public safety capital needs and the remaining 10% be used in general government programs. The city expects to collect about $407,000 in the fiscal year 26-27 from this tax and will use the funds to purchase police vehicles and fire apparatus, remodel the fire department's lobby, and replace the Rogers Park carousel. Staff are not proposing to increase the fee for the coming fiscal year, and the fee has remained the same since 2014. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. Any questions for staff? Hearing none, I will now call on persons who signed up to comment on the resolution. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and city of residence for the record, and whether you are a proponent, opponent, or other comment. Are there any members of the audience who would like to provide public testimony? Hearing none. Any on Zoom? Hearing none. The hearing is now closed. Is there a motion from council to approve the resolution?
Motion to approve resolution 2026-17.
Second.
Thank you. Motion 2026-17 is moved by Councilor Marshall and seconded by Council President Valenzuela. Are there further or additional questions or further discussion from council? Hearing none, will the city manager please read the resolution by title only?
Resolution 2026-17, adopting capital improvements program excise tax and repealing Resolution 2025-30.
Thank you. City Recorder, please call the roll.
Counselor Marshall,
Yes.
Council President Valenzuela,
Yes.
Counselor Schimmel,
Yes.
Counselor Martinez,
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel.
Yes, the vote is 5-0. Resolution 202617 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council. Okay, moving on. Okay, we are now on to Resolution 202618. I will now open the public hearing on Resolution 2026-18. If approved by the City Council, this resolution will set fees and charges for the 2025-2027 biennial budget year. Do any councilors have a conflict of interest to declare? None. City Manager Jesse Van der Zanden will now present the staff report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Section 34.02 of the City Code states that licenses, permits, and fees shall be adjusted by council resolution every year, effective in July. Section 3403 states that the adjustment should be based on the Portland Consumer Price Index, or CPI, or the percentage of the wage adjustment for city employees unless a cost of service analysis has been conducted. Wage increases for fiscal year 26-27 range between 3 to 4%. The Portland West Coast CPI ranged from 2.7 to 3.5% in calendar year 26. Staff are proposing to raise fees by 3% except in specific cases noted below, which I'll go over briefly, where a cost of service analysis was done. Just by point, last year's fee amounts were rounded to the nearest quarter dollar to simplify transactions and minimize the need for small change. This trend continued to the half dollar this year for fees under $15 and to the whole dollar for fees over $15. Standard rounding was used to arrive at the final fee. Last, some fees remain unchanged, including those set by the state, for example, the liquor licenses or other agencies such as the Washington County Cooperative Library Services. Now for those items that are apart from the 3%, for business licenses, we have very few permits that are in the 31 to 60 day category. They're mostly in the 0 to 30 day category, so staff is proposing to combine those two categories. So a temporary permit would be from 0 to 60 days. And we are proposing to apply the fee that the lower of the fees, which was the fee that applied to the 0 to the 30 days, that would now be good for a 0 to 60 day temporary business license. Liquor licenses I already went over. Those would be reduced back to the state level. I would just say that the city did not apply the city administered fee for liquor licenses last year. It used the state fee. For motor vehicle and fire public safety incidents, we're proposing to keep the fee the same this year and not raise it. For the Rogers Room, there are some capital improvement changes, such as a new divider that we are looking at doing. Also, the cost of utilizing that room exceeds the current fee for that room, and we also did a market analysis, and it showed that it's significantly below the market value. So we are proposing to raise that fee by 10%, I believe from $19 to $21. We're also proposing to implement an out-of-city rate. Currently, for most of our facility rentals, we have an out-of-city rate of a 30% differential. So if you are not in Forest Grove and you are outside the city, you would pay a 30% increase in the fee that would be charged to in-city persons. So we're proposing to do an out-of-city rate for the Rogers Room. Same thing for the community auditorium. We're proposing to add a 30% out-of-city rate differential for the community auditorium. Interestingly, there's also a non-for-profit and a for-profit fee differential for the community auditorium. That's the only place here, is the only place that has that existing fee differential. So staff was wanting to take a look at all of our facility rentals over the coming year and look to see if that may be applicable to our other facilities as well. But for this year, we're proposing a 30% out-of-city differential for the community auditorium. For the pool and the spray park rental, we are proposing to do a 10% cost in just the rental fee. This is not the admission fees. This is just for if you have a private rental, whether it's in the classroom or whether it's at the pool. We did a cost of service analysis for that, and the cost of providing that service does exceed the fee. And then last, for the Parks Facility Rental Light Fee, that's the fee that you pay if you rent the lights at one of the facility fields. Recall that last year, the facility field fee itself is no longer on the fee schedule. We were actually proposing to reduce that fee a little bit and round down from $61.25 to $61 per hour. The fee is for other rentals. It's $31, I believe, and then it's $61 for larger facilities. And lastly, we're proposing an out-of-city rental rate differential for those rental lights as well, and that would be 30% commensurate with all of the other facility rentals. So unless there is questions, that concludes my staff report. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, members of the council.
Thank you, Jesse. Any questions? Go ahead, Councilor Schimmel.
Just confirming, these are adjustments to existing fees, no new fees.
Pardon?
These are adjustments to existing
Yes,
fees, no
correct.
new fees.
Yep. There's no new fees. Yep.
And just on an aside, and not necessarily to be addressed right now, but we've talked about shared use agreements with Parks and Rec and the Forest Grove School District, and I don't know if this is accurate or not, but some community members that use, they are like Santos coaches, but they use the high school. They say that our rate for lights is different than the school district rate
It is.
for
Yeah.
lights, and so I'm just. If that's one way we could maybe get on the same page, like one small thing we could agree on,
Yeah.
that would be amazing.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Mayor. The school's fee are $40 an hour. Our fees range from $30 an hour up to $61 an hour. And that has been highlighted as something that we could collaborate with the school on and ensuring there's just kind of an even fee across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be about, ours probably range because of how many lights
It
and
does. Yeah.
so anyways, it just would make our life a little easier. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I will now call on persons who signed up to comment on the resolution. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Please state your name and address for the record and whether you are a proponent, opponent, or other comment. Anyone in the audience wishing to give public testimony? Seeing none. Any on Zoom? Seeing none. The hearing is now closed. Is there a motion from council to approve the resolution?
I move to approve 2026-18.
I'll second.
Thank you. The motion was made by Councilor Martinez and seconded by Council President Valenzuela. Are there any additional questions or further discussion from the council on the motion before we proceed with the roll call vote? I think my only comment that I would like to make is I'm really happy to see that we're trying to be consistent with our out of city, in city, for profit, nonprofit. I think, really looking at that, and I like systems. I like it to be fair. I like people to know what to expect. And so I think those are all really good things. So those are my only comments. Okay. Will the city manager please read the resolution by title only?
Resolution 2026-18, setting general fees and charges effective July 1st, 2026, and repealing resolution number 2025-32.
Will the city recorder please call roll?
Council President Valenzuela,
Yes.
Councilor Schimmel,
Yes.
Councilor Martinez,
Yes.
Councilor Marshall,
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel.
Yes, the vote is 5-0. Resolution 2026-18 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council. Thank you. Next up is, I want to say, our police chief, David Marzilli, with resolution 2026-19. Hi, chief. How are you?
I am good. How are you?
I'm well, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. This is a request to approve an intergovernmental agency agreement between the City of Forest Grove and the Forest Grove School District. As you know, we have had a long-standing cooperative relationship with the School Resource Officer Program with the school district, and we are asking to continue that with an IGA. This new IGA is basically unchanged from the existing IGA that actually expired May 1st of this year. The new IGA continues the initial term of 1 year and allows for an additional 2 one-year extensions not to exceed a total of 3 years altogether. Those 2 one-year extensions would be authorized by the city manager in the Forest Grove School District Superintendent to continue those. It also has been updated to reflect the current wages of the police officer and includes a 4% increase per year that the IGA is in effect. The fiscal impact is unchanged, and the SRO position is included in the 2025 to 27 biennial budget. That's basically all that I have. If you have any questions.
Okay, any questions for the chief? Hearing none, what is the wish of the council?
Move to approve Resolution 2026-19.
Second.
Resolution 2026 was moved by Councilor Martinez and seconded by Councilor Marshall. Any discussion or questions? Or just discussion from council? I just want to say, in my other job, I think the school resource officer does a lot of really good things. But one of the things that we might not realize they do is a lot of education. So I've been fortunate enough to have the SRO come into my health class and then all the 8th grade health classrooms and talk about fentanyl and do other things. And then also just creating positive relationships between students and law enforcement. So Officer Yance comes in and plays basketball with the kids fairly often at the middle school. And it's really quite nice because I'm like, oh, it's nice to see you again. He's like, this is my like stress release. This is like how I have fun. And so I think just showing kids like all the resources that police officers offer is really good.
Thank
you. Okay. Will the city manager please read the resolution by title only?
Resolution 2026-19, approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Forest Grove, between the Forest Grove School District and the City of Forest Grove for a school resource officer and authorizing the city manager to execute the agreement.
Thank you. All those in favor of Resolution 202619, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The resolution is approved by the City Council in a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
And I'm going to call up our other chief, Chief Gearing, to talk about our emergency operations plan. Hello,
Thank you.
Chief.
Hi, Mayor. Good evening. On May 11th, the fire department had an opportunity to provide a pretty comprehensive PowerPoint presentation on the plan. Tonight, I'd like to just give a brief summary of the plan that's before you. In 1985, the City of Forest Grove adopted the first plan. Through the years, there have been a number of different plans that have been adopted and updated. The last one was in 2014, and so it's been quite some time and time for an update. The EOP provides the base framework that defines operational priorities and the method of implementation the city will utilize to guide and support emergency management efforts. This EOP will be reviewed periodically as we exercise the plan, and then a full update is recommended in 5 years. The plan before you tonight complies with the National Response Framework, which includes NIMS, or National Incident Management System, and the Incident Command System, or ICS. The plan also is in compliance with Oregon Revised Statute 401, which governs the emergency management in the state. There are 3 elements or parts to the plan: the basic plan, the functional annexes, and then the hazard planning annex. Approval of the plan tonight will allow us to move forward and start exercising the plan, building a team of emergency workers for the EOC, and then ensuring that our EOC is properly ready for the event of an emergency and that we can stand it up. That's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions? I have one question. Do you do like drills when it says you're going to update the plan as it becomes operational? But how do you know if the plan works if we don't like try it out? I don't know. I work in a school. We do drills once a month.
Yeah, a very good question. And that is part of the plan, is to provide a roster of EOC workers, have them trained to work in the EOC, have a number of them trained in position-specific areas so that when they take a position in the EOC, they know what their responsibility is and what the expectation is. And yeah, you're right, Mayor. In order to do that and comply with what's in the plan, we have to have that training and then put everybody together and create simulated scenarios and exercises that will help us to do just that, exercise the plan and make sure everybody knows what the expectation is.
Cool. Exciting. I'm glad we did. It was overdue, this plan. So I'm excited. And any other questions for the chief? Hearing none. Okay, what's the wish of the council?
Move to approve Resolution 2026-20.
Second.
Thank you. Resolution 2026-20 was moved by Council President Valenzuela and seconded by Councilor Martinez. Any discussion from the council? We're a chatty bunch today. Okay, hearing none. Will the city manager please read the resolution by title only?
Resolution 2026-20, adopting the City of Forest Grove Emergency Operations Plan.
Thank you. All those in favor of approving Resolution 2026-20, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none, Resolution 2026-20 is approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a 5-0 vote. Thank you, Chief. Okay, we're going to move on to item 6, F6, which is Resolution 2026-21, and I'm going to introduce our city attorney. Is it Guymont? Is that,
perfect.
Emily Guymont, and our Light and Power Director. By Keith, you're filling in. I didn't know if it was Jesse. My agenda is something else. So Keith Horman, thank you very much for coming tonight too. And I'll turn it over to you all.
Well, good evening, Mayor, members of council. It's a pleasure to be in front of you today to present the Resolution 2026-21, which is a collective bargaining agreement that the city's bargaining team has tentatively agreed to with the IBEW bargaining unit's bargaining team. And we are here to ask you to vote yes to ratify this. I'll give you a quick rundown of the highlights of this agreement, but do know that the entire agreement proposed is in your packet if you want to do a line by line yourselves. So this is a 3-year collective bargaining agreement, bargaining really centered around wages this time around. So the wage increases that we have tentatively agreed to are as follows: for the journeyman, lineman positions and all other positions that are tied to that position by a percentage, 10% in year 1 of the contract, 5% in year 2, and 5% in year 3. For the warehouse worker position and those who are not tied to but in the same class of wage increases as the warehouse worker, those increases are 4% in year 1, 3.5% in year 2, and 3% in year 3. The other big economic component of this contract is an insurance change. We have tentatively agreed to a move to insurance coverage provided by Lineco, which is an insurance trust separate from the CIS provided plans that the city currently offers its employees. Under the terms of that article, the city would pay 95% of the premiums associated with Lineco, which is the same as the 95% that the city also pays for the CIS premiums that the bargaining unit members currently receive. This move, at least for the next plan year, presents a pretty good savings for the city, and so we have negotiated savings split language with IBEW. The rule is that if the city experiences savings in premium costs compared to what the city would have paid if the members had remained on the CIS offered plans, then IBEW and the city will split those savings 60-40 in favor of IBEW, and IBEW members will receive that 60% as contributions in their VITA accounts. We also have the safety language built in there. If the city does not experience any savings with Lineco, then the city may return to CIS offered plans at its option. Those are the highlights. It was good bargaining. I want to thank the city staff team, my bargaining team, and the staff who helped us in the background, council for their guidance when we've spoken to council about this a couple times, and then also to the IBEW bargaining team for very collegial bargaining and a good result. So please vote yes. Anything to add? Any questions?
Perfect. Thanks. Any questions? Yeah, no questions, just a comment to y'all. want to thank you all and Brenda and city staff and, Light and Power. I think, I'm sure you don't get sick of hearing it, Keith, but the community really loves our Light and Power department. And I'm glad that you all were able to come to such a positive agreement for everybody. So I appreciate the work that goes into it. Okay. I don't think there's any other questions. So is there a motion on the floor?
Move pass resolution 2026-21.
Second.
Thank you. Resolution 2026-21 was moved by Counselor Schimmel and seconded by Counselor Martinez. Any discussion by council? Okay. Will the city manager read it by title only, please?
Resolution 2026-21, resolution authorizing execution of a labor agreement between the City of Forest Grove and the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, IBEW, Local 125, effective July 1st, 2026, and expiring June 30th, 2029.
Mariah, I'm going to have us do a roll call vote because it's a con. Thanks.
Counselor Schimmel?
Yes.
Counselor Martinez?
Yes.
Counselor Marshall?
Yes.
Council President Valenzuela?
Yes.
Mayor Wenzel?
Yes, resolution 2026-21 has been approved by the Forest Grove City Council in a 5-0 vote. Thank you all. Okay, now we're going to move on to item G on our agenda, which is council communications. And I'm going to start with our council president.
All right. Okay, so I had mentioned before that the Policy Advisory Board was canceling the meetings for May and June. However, we did receive notification that we have an emergency meeting on June 11th. There is a scoring issue with one of our funded projects. So I will be reporting on that next time. All right. And we did meet the Library Commission last Wednesday. And we had the pleasure of meeting Jack Buck, the new library services supervisor. And he presented to us 2 initiatives. One was an assessment tool handout, which is really wonderful to be able to get feedback from the staff about different projects that they've had. And guidelines on how to share the library. It has become something important that needs to be done, particularly where you have the children's area and then you have some adults there that are kind of bothered by the noise. I mean, you have kids, they're going to make noise, right? But it is important to teach them how to behave, at a library. I agree with that. But if a child is making noise, I pick up my book and I find me another corner on the other side of the library, right? That would be my guess. But anyway, it's still a very, very good idea. Good news from the Friends of the Library. Book sales record, 7,000. So it was a great success. And they will adopt a meeting in their a budget in their June meeting to include the sales from this successful book sale event. And that's all. That's all I have from the library since Pauline was here.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Council President. I'm going to move on to Councilor Marshall.
I actually have nothing right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I'm just going to go down the line to Councilor Martinez.
All I will need to report on is the Sister City Committee continues to work forward on their 501c3 status.
Have they taken it to the Chamber Board yet, or no?
They've been talking to the Chamber Board. There's been some issues with really getting together sufficiently. So
cool. Thanks. Councilor Schimmel.
Thank you. I might be stealing some of Jesse's thunder here, but I do want to talk about an ADU auxiliary dwelling unit workshop held by the city staff. This was held a couple weeks ago or just after our last meeting. It drew in about 35 highly engaged attendees. They're very eager to engage with building and planning staff on their respective properties. So there's a lot of good interest. The next workshop will be June 10th in Cornelius. So this is a joint venture with the city of Cornelius, and I thought the event went great. So the next session will delve more into the permitting process, and we'll have some contractors and architects present to help folks along with their project.
Can I ask a question? Do you have to go to the first session to be able to go to the June 10th session?
Nope,
Or
not at all.
Yeah,
There may be some information that's shared again, or at least some of the presentation material. But the intention is that that folks will be able to sit down with an architect or contractor or city staff to get a little more detail.
That's great.
Yeah. So good signal of interest. Economic Development Commission met this last week. A lot of enthusiasm from the group in relation to both placemaking and tourism. Miles went through the placemaking presentation with the group, and one of the commission members shared their own presentation on tourism concepts that I thought complemented the placemaking presentation. One, ours focusing on the location, theirs focusing more on what you can do in those locations. So there's some interest in being contributing to advising the council on the direction as that develops, and also engaging with the chamber on their tourism efforts. So it was good to see the enthusiasm in the group and wanting to contribute to some of those developments. And then on the TV highway transit project, for context, the completion of this project is 2030. So this is one of those recaps and where we are in that process. So the activity this summer is they're going to do some community outreach. So they may be reaching out to Stephanie and maybe join them on their market booth to solicit some community feedback on the bus stop concepts, where they are in association with the TV highway transit lane. So folks will have an opportunity to weigh in. The project does have a community advisory group of a dozen people or so that has a Forest Grove resident as its chair. And they participate with the overall committee in our deliberations. And my sense is that we get really good, robust feedback given to TriMet throughout the course of the project. So that feels pretty solid. This is just extending that opportunity to the general public. So as I mentioned, the project is trending toward 2030. The big challenge right now is securing the funds. We've done our job, our task of appropriating our installment. The next important installment is by the state securing $56 million in state commitment necessary to unlock a $150 million match from the Federal Transportation Agency. So in the next legislative session, we'll have to, I think, in terms of our transportation priorities, we'll have to consider making that a key priority so that we can secure that, because 150 is half the project that we need from the federal government.
Yeah, I feel like I don't want to interrupt. It's such a challenging project, right? To keep engagement. I mean, 'cause I was on it before you. Like this has been going on for a really long time, and so TriMet, Metro, municipalities, like this challenge of keeping engagement, keeping the project moving, but it's just such a big ask. And the type of grant they're going for, you have to get that state funding, and they couldn't even pass a transportation package last time. I mean, Good job keeping up with that one.
So that 56 million, in terms of our advocacy, is determined that that's the top priority for us in the next year. That's it.
Yeah, thank you first. That is a tough one. Feels like everyone involved with that project. I mean, because like when you're saying community engagement, we did that like 4 years ago. I mean, so it's like, how do you not fatigue people with the community engagement while you're trying to secure the funding? And it's a really needed project, right? So, okay, sorry. That's our last council communication. Jesse, you're up. City manager report.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Today, the city applied for the U.S. DOT Safe Routes and Roads for All, or the SS4A program. Our grant was successfully applied and successfully accepted. So the grant was for $11.26 million, and the total project $14.76 million, and the remaining amount in between was the local match. So just wanted to report that we met the deadline, and we had multiple letters of support. So to those community organizations that supported us in the grant application, thank you very much. On a little different note, we were successful, if you recall, approximately 18 months ago, receiving a Oregon Department of Energy grant for $435,000 to underground some wires in a wooded area and by David Hill. We applied for another grant through ODO for a similar purpose. Unfortunately, this time around, we were not successful, likely related because we were successful the last time. Another report from Light and Power is we have the solar array that is being installed at the Forest Grove substation. We have that out for bid. That bid closes this Friday.
Let's go.
So we'll report back to council once we receive select a bid. The police received over 700 pounds of prescription drugs during the drug take back event on April 25th. That is a new record. So
Yeah, good job. The back row's killing it.
Yeah. The city has successfully collaborated with on a new intergovernmental agreement with Tigard for IT services. We're sharpening the pencil on that. We should be bringing that back to the council likely at the next meeting. I wanted to add a little bit to Councilor Valenzuela's remarks. There is a survey in the children's area. If you go into the library, it's just an area survey. It's basically asking some questions about the experience in the area. What do you like? What do you not like? It's very open. There's a QR code. You can also take a paper survey. That opened today, and that will be out for 3 weeks. So if you're in that area and you want to take a survey, please do. Let's see. The Friends was reported on. Let's see. I was going to report on the ADU, but that got reported on. We are working on the project advisory committee for the housing capacity analysis. So we have sent out some invites to folks to participate on what we're calling the PAC for the housing capacity analysis. So that's ongoing. And then just regarding placemaking, the feedback we got from the council at the last perk session was we'll get some community input. And so we are either have or in the process of scheduling meetings with Pacific, Adelante Mujeres, Chamber of Commerce, and the Downtown Association of Forest Grove, and also asking those groups to involve their members in these various meetings. So, and of course, Councilor Schimmel, you reported on EDC today, which was another outreach effort. So that concludes my report. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jesse. Those are all like really good. I mean, that was a good report. Like lots of hope and so thanks. I mean, I shouldn't say that, like, surprisingly, you always give a good report, but like some very good news. I know that sounded very backhanded.
Actually.
I apologize. I just have a few things to report on. I went as an audience member for the Metro Future Visioning Committee had a meeting out at the Hidden Creek Rec Center in Hillsborough on the 14th of May. So I went out to listen to kind of see what they were chatting about. And yeah, it was interesting because I can't help but be blunt tonight. I think I'm always blunt, but the people on the task force, like half of them didn't show up. So I arrived and they had the table for the group, the committee, and then I'm in the audience. Counselor Gonzalez had invited me to attend to listen, and I'm in the audience and there was more people in the audience, because Metro always brings a very large staff. I don't know if you guys noticed that, but Metro staff, and then myself and Jason Snyder from the county. But anyways, that was a little bit disheartening to see. I'm like, oh, this is a big thing. And when people don't show up, I don't know how they're arranging it. I don't know if it's because they go to different areas in the region. But anyways, so some topics they're going to explore for drivers of change. I will say one thing that was interesting is that Representative McLean was there. She was also a guest. She's not on the committee. And she was on the last visioning team. And so she reminded the group of the last themes being seamless services in urban and rural areas, food sources, and open spaces. That was so the last time the vision was done was in 1995. So now some of their buzzwords were urgent optimism, focus on credible hope, thinking generationally, and the drivers of change. So they were very early in the discussion. And those are some of the things I wrote down and heard that that were interesting. Then I attended WCCC. I could only attend about a half an hour because my teaching schedule was different that day. But there was the commission voted on some expenditure requests that will help our neighbors in Cornelius on 14th and 26th with a couple projects. And then also Washington County had applied for 10.2 million TDT expenditure for Quatomic and Baseline. And that was approved as well. And then the last thing I just wanted to say thank you to is the American Legion 2 put on their traditional or their annual Memorial Day ceremony. Councilor Schimmel attended as well. And, they just did a great job. Our former police chief was the guest speaker, Dale Thaler, who's working on our Veterans Park. He really organizes that and does a really good job. And I think, just a good reminder, some things I heard that really stuck with me, right, is that what sets this country apart is that, we have ideals that come from a constitution, and that's, people sacrifice their life and families sacrifice for those ideals and those principles. And so with that, I'm going to adjourn this meeting, but we do have a work session following. Thank you very much. Good night. Okay, but Council